All right, so let's start with the big story that we are tracking on WION at this hour. Iran and Israel have intensified their attacks on each other as a wider region conflict looms in West Asia. Iran has now, in some pretty dramatic scenes, struck Haifa, and Israel, on the other hand, has targeted Tehran, as both have launched some massive missile strikes pretty much at the same time. Now, Israel claims to have killed three people have been killed in the attacks in Haifa. Now, Iran's oil ministry has said that the Israeli attacks targeted two fuel depots in Tehran. Iran has said that the Shahran oil depot was targeted in the Israeli attack, and the situation, they claim, is now under control.
נופל ב-100%. החתיכות של הטילים... רצו הדסה. לא יודע, נפל 50.
Now, Israel, on the other hand, claims that Iran targeted its oil and gas refining facility in Haifa.
נופל ב-100%. החתיכות של הטילים... רצו הדסה. לא יודע, נפל 50. לא ספרתי. יוסי! מה זה? מה זה? אלוהים ישמור.
The United States, on the other hand, has issued some travel advisory for its citizens in Iran. The State Department has asked the U.S. citizens should in fact depart from Iran immediately. All right, now joining us on the broadcast, we've got Mr. James J. Marlow, who's a foreign and defense analyst. Mr. Marlow, thank you very much indeed for joining us here on WION. Now, we've witnessed a very dramatic escalation in just the last 3-4 hours, where both Iran and Israel have struck the oil and gas refining facilities. In your assessments, what's actually playing out at this moment?
Well, let me just update you right now. For the last 10 minutes, and I've just moved into a safe room, there has been the red alert system, which has been activated across the country. I understand, since when you've been introducing the headlines, that around 50 to 60 missiles have been fired now in the last few minutes towards Israel. The system here is very clever because you have what's known as the home command that alerts that whether the missile has actually been activated from Yemen or from Iran, it takes maybe between 2, 3, 4, 10 minutes sometimes before it actually enters into Israeli airspace, if it makes it that far. In other words, if it's not shut down. Because there are so many, some of them are getting through at this point. And then, of course, people have got plenty of time to get into their safe rooms. Some of them run, and therefore there are accidents. I can't tell you about casualties at this point. Right now, obviously, this is a full-scale war which is taking place. So the authorities want to keep down exactly if missiles are landing, not for those to be actually taken, shown, and put on social media, because obviously that helps the enemy. But there's no question about it. What's taking place right now was expected and will continue in the coming days.
Are you surprised at the scale of the Iranian response that has come through? Because this is the first time that civilian areas within the state of Israel have come under attack by ballistic missiles of this nature.
Well, it's not the first time, because this actually is the third round from the Iranians' point of view who have actually fired ballistic missiles, besides the drones and all the different projectiles. So Israel was expecting this. Was aware of this, and it believes it's pretty much got it under control. One of the things that have actually prompted
Mr. Marlow,
Israel
if I can just interject you there, last year in the month of March and April, and then again in October, when the Iranians had carried out these missile and drone strikes, they said that they were sticking more to just military targets such as the Israeli air bases. But what we've witnessed in the last 24, 36 hours is that civilian areas and residential areas such as Tel Aviv have been struck in a manner that we've never witnessed in the last 7 decades of the Israeli history.
Well, that's what the Iranians said, but I'm not sure that many Israelis or many people around the world really believe that. The Iranians have called for the death, the destruction of Israel, and also death to America for more than 20 years. So anything that they say can't really be taken. I believe there was a report this morning to say that hundreds of people have been killed. The Iranians were saying this inside of Israel. It's simply not true. It's misinformation. One of the reasons why I think Israel, and I have to tell you, here in Israel, there's a lot of Israelis who've been, it's beyond their expectations as to what they've carried out inside of Iran at this point, not just hitting the nuclear plants, but also hitting the Iranian guards, taking out their main commandos, the head of military. I mean, they've got this intelligence which is just beyond expectations, clearly on the ground. They had at one time drones which are flying across Iran, if they're not already happening right now, plus Israeli planes, Israeli fighter jets inside the Iranian airspace. And the reason why you're seeing this right now is because that Iran, for many, many years, built up this sort of outer zone protection for it, i.e. Hezbollah in Lebanon, and obviously the Assad regime in Syria, Hamas and Islamic Jihad inside of Gaza with their long-range missiles. And Iran always felt protected. So when it also called for the destruction of Israel, it believed that it had a very high element of protection. Now, because a lot of Hezbollah has been taken out, certainly its military leadership, and it says that it will not get involved in this war. Assad regime has obviously fallen. Hamas and Islamic Jihad, yes, they're still fighting in Gaza, but they're very much restricted. So now Iran has been hit. And this was the plan of the government all the time, working alongside the IDF. And when President Trump came into power, Netanyahu and the government felt this was a great opportunity. Even the International Atomic Energy Agency actually admitted that it was beyond their understanding as to why there's so much enrichment of uranium which was taking place, which they released this report last Thursday. And also the other thing as well, which I think a lot of people is not taking into account, is many of the news networks have been reporting that there's been a lot of tension between Netanyahu and President Trump. It seems to be that that wasn't the case, and that again,
we'll come to that, Mr. Marlow. We'll come to that. There are many different issues that are all relevant to what is happening at this moment. You're right when you point out about the disparity between the technological prowess of the Israelis, who are of course backed by the Americans. The Israelis have access to some of the most top-notch weapons that the Americans of course provide them with, while the Iranians on the other hand have to make do with the ballistic missiles, which by and large they've managed to manufacture themselves. So there is a clear disparity in terms of their technological and military capabilities. Meanwhile, what we are witnessing at this moment are some live images of, one assumes, Iranian ballistic missiles that are being intercepted by the Israeli Iron Dome interceptors. But still, you do see that some of these missiles still manage to get through. Take a look at these images. right, so these are the live images that are being beamed straight from Tel Aviv. We also heard the sirens blare out, telling the people there that they need to take immediate shelter because of imminent danger, possibly from these ballistic missiles and drones that have been fired. We've got with us Mr. James Marlow, who's of course joining us from the state of Israel. Mr. Marlow, before I proceed any further, I hope you're in a safe place and it is okay for you to talk to us.
So I'm happy to continue. I don't know if you can hear some explosions around me, but I'm in a safe room right now. Whilst you were just showing those pictures, again, I'm getting alerts, which is the red alert system, the sirens as such, which is across the country. I'm also hearing from the IDF that, again, at this point, they're bombing certain places in Iran. I can't tell you exactly where at this point. But again, you've got just millions of people just running to the shelters right now, or they're probably in the shelters at coming up on 10 to 3 o'clock in the morning. Kind of very inconvenient for a lot of people because with little kids and things like that. Perhaps I can just point out just one thing that you said just before you went to the pictures.
Sure, go ahead.
With regard to the Israeli arms coming from America, I have to tell you that there are a number of Israeli companies, and there was a report that was released by the Israeli Ministry of Defense just over a week ago, which I spent a lot of time in looking through that. And it looked at the sales of Israeli arms going across the world. And they are the highest now than they've ever been before because Israel is a mass producer of arms, which not just includes missiles and launchers and also the air defense systems, but also armored vehicles as well, and all sorts of defense mechanisms to shoot down missiles, not the Iron Dome as such, of course, and not the David Sling. And you mentioned that it was Iron Dome shooting down. It may not be, actually, because when it comes to ballistic missiles, we've actually got a system called the Arrow. It's the Arrow 3. The Arrow 3 can actually get up into outer space and knock out some of these international ballistic missiles which are coming from Iran, because they're also going to outer space. The Iron Dome wouldn't work for that. The Iron Dome takes out rockets that come from Lebanon and from Gaza and maybe from Syria. The David Sling is something which is in between those. So there are different mechanisms, and Israel has built all this up. They're actually saying a lot of them across the world, including in Asia, certainly in places in the Middle East where they've got relations. But their biggest buyers, believe it or not, is the Europeans and Britain. So some of the European Britain is actually criticizing Israel from a political point of view, for political reasons, but at the same time, they're buying more arms from Israel at this time of volatility in the world today, where the Europeans have been told to start reinforcing their defense systems because of a potential threat, maybe from Russia or China or somewhere else.
I think you've made a very important point there. It is indeed true that the state of Israel, of course, manufactures and is also a very large exporter of arms. These are arms that are used by different nations. It has markets in Europe. That of course, is a point that's well taken, Mr. Marlow. But I also want to, in fact, want you to weigh in on what is happening at this moment. Ever since the Israeli Prime Minister began with Operation Rising Lion, a lot of people would in fact turn around and say that this perhaps is a missed opportunity. What could have been achieved through means of diplomacy is now being attempted to be achieved through military means. Because the Iranians were at the negotiating table, the Iranians wanted to strike a deal. The Iranians have always maintained that they don't want nuclear weapons, and it's only a peaceful civilian nuclear program that they want. With that being the case, why did the Israeli leadership decide to start this war?
Well, they've said that, but again, a lot of people didn't believe that. And there was those people who worked for the IAEA who've now left, who've given another number of interviews to American networks and also Israeli networks to say that we never believed them in the first place, that they were enriching so much uranium. In fact, actually, Iran is the only country in the world today that enriches that much uranium for so-called peaceful purposes and for a peaceful nuclear facility. And the world just didn't believe it, including, by the way, President Trump. He was advised, he gave them 60 days, they were in negotiations, and it seems to be, as we're finding out right now, is that that 60-day period expired on early Friday morning, Thursday night, Friday morning. President Trump claims he knew about it all the time and he gave the go-ahead. Since that time, he said, I want the Iranians to come back to the negotiating table. I don't think they will at this point. They're very stubborn. President Trump said that they are very, very good, tough negotiators. The Israelis were a little bit concerned that maybe they were such tough negotiators that they may be taken for a ride like the previous American administrations. But President Trump seems to have kept to his word. Now, the only thing that may change is if the Iranians are so angry about allowing the Israelis to do exactly what we're seeing right now. And what I'm hearing is that the fire is still burning way out of control, even though the Iranians claim that they've got it under control in the oil facilities in Iran itself. But if the Iranians get really angry, they may just go for some American bases, which are much closer to them than, of course, Israel is. Now, if that's the case, then, of course, the Americans would jump into the war. So they're probably weighing that up right now as to what is the right decision, to keep hitting Israel, or maybe we should just send America a message. Because after all, the Iranians have also said death to America.
All right. We'll have to leave it there. We're completely out of time. Thank you very much indeed, Mr. Mwalo, for joining us with your perspective.